Hey everybody. In a previous video, we discussed the political and social structure that developed during the Middle Ages in Western Europe, known as feudalism. That was the political and social hierarchy that was based on land, known as fiefs, and protection. In this video, we are going to discuss the economic structure that developed during this same time. This structure was known as manorialism, or the manorial system, which was based around how the lords would manage the pieces of land that they controlled. It focused on the relationship between the landowner and the land workers. So, what was a manor? A manor was a large piece of land that included the manor house, the castle, in most cases, where the lord and his family would stay, and the land and the buildings that surrounded the house. The average manor was approximately 750 to 1,500 acres. Manors were considered self-sufficient. Let me underline that word, self-sufficient. Manors were self-sufficient, which meant that they could produce everything that was needed in terms of goods and services for the people that lived on the manor. These goods and services included food, clothing, farming tools, furniture, things of that nature. So self-sufficient, everything needed could be produced on the manor, on that piece of land. Important for the people living on the manor, there was also a church, which was usually the second largest building on the manor. So not only did it have the capabilities to be self-sufficient, provide the goods and services needed, but they were also able to meet their spiritual needs through a church. So here's an illustration of what a typical manor would look like in this economic system. So as you can see, the largest house, the largest building altogether on the manor was the lord's house, where him and his family would stay. But as you look around, you will see at a distance there is a village of very smaller homes compared to the lord's house, the manor house, the village where the peasants and serfs would live, those who worked the land. So you see the lord's house, you see where the peasants and serfs stayed in their smaller one-room homes within the village. But you also see other buildings on the manor. You see the church and the house of the priest. You also see a bakehouse, a mill, a blacksmith, places, buildings that were designed to help in providing the goods and services required for the people living on the manor. This piece of land, this fief that the Lord controlled, also included, the forest, the fields, which we'll talk about in a few moments, a river if it flows through. So again, the manors were built to be self-sufficient, to provide all the goods and services required. And one reason it was meant to do this is because of society at the time. It was very dangerous to travel even short distances. So being self-sufficient meant they didn't have to leave the manor to get what they needed. So here are some photos of what the manor house where the Lord and his family would live, what they would have looked like. Now, I want you to look, especially through some of these photos, at the size of the manor house, but also you'll see walls, you'll see safeguards put in place for protection. Because again, society is in a sense of disorder and fear from invasion. So you see, and look at that one. You would have enough rooms for everyone. This one has a moat around it, this manor house. There's another one. An example, look at the walls. Look at the walls for protection. There are other safeguards put in place. If you look at this illustration, you can see some of the safeguards that when they constructed the manor castle, the manor house, they would put these safeguards in place for protection. So you have a moat around. That would make it more difficult to attack. Drawbridge that would go up and down. You have slits within the walls where people from inside could shoot arrows to possible attackers. You have a safe place for shelter during attack. Thick walls. The house was made of thick brick walls. And so I'm going to say it again, but this is just another illustration of how society was during the Middle Ages in Western Europe. If it was all rainbows and butterflies and peace, then they wouldn't need these safeguards. But while the manor houses were large in size and full of many rooms, we have peasant, as this photo illustrates, right? The homes of the peasants were very small in comparison, right? They were single room, most of them were single room dwellings in which you would have the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, the closet, the livestock that you kept in the same room. And so while we see the lords living a life of luxury, we see the peasants and serfs really struggling and really having the very basics in terms of their living conditions. And of course, we need to include a photo of the church, what a typical church would look like on the manor. The fact that a church was included on this self-sufficient manor just illustrates how significant religion was to the people of Western Europe. Right? Christianity remained a stronghold in the lives of all people, from monarch, lords, knights, and peasants and serfs. Right? Religion played a role in all their lives. And because the manorial system focused so much on agriculture, we see some improvements made in agricultural practices. They developed a heavier plow, which made deeper cuts into the soil, pushed the soil sideways. It was able to, in lack of a better word, kind of cut up the soil, which made it easier to plant the seeds. And it made farming easier and faster for the land workers. There was also the development of a three-field system in which 1/3 of the fields would be left empty, would be left fallow each year. And because they would leave 1/3 of the fields empty each year, it preserved the nutrients in the soil, which would have provided better crops during the years in which they were used. So they developed this three-field system in order to prevent the soil to be at a point where it can't be used for growing crops. Okay, so they can constantly rotate which fields are being used to preserve the nutrients. And so here's an illustration. On this manor, you have three fields. One, during this season, is growing wheat and rye. One field is growing oats and beans, and a third one is left empty. It's left fallow so that it could preserve the nutrients, it could replenish itself, and then the following year, they would just rotate it. And maybe this field right here would be left fallow. And then the following year, they would continue to rotate. So this was some information on manorialism, the economic structure that developed during the Middle Ages in Western Europe.